ॐ तव कथामृतं तप्तजीवनं कविभिरीडितं कल्मषापहं शरवणमङ्गलं श्रीमदाततं भुवनन्ति भूरिराजः. Your words are like nectar, bringing life to scorched souls. They are praised by poets and remove all sin. They are auspicious to hear, wonderful and exalted. Those who spread these words throughout the world are truly giving souls. Welcome to our class on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We're continuing chapter 25, advice to Pundit Shashadhar. The date is Monday, June 30th, 1884, and we're at the top of page 483. Master. And now he's speaking to Pundit Shashadhar, Surendra, Mani Malek, and of course, others are all in the room as well. Hazra also. Master, in order to realize God, a devotee should make use of a particular attitude, the attitude of a hero, or a friend, or a handmaid, or a child. Now, this first part of this is a statement that Sri Ramakrishna makes over and over and over again, that we utilize this concept of a relationship with God. But here, for some reason, he's not giving the very traditional list. There's a traditional list. It's called the Pancha-bhava. There's 5 different relationships in the Vaishnava tradition. But the Shakta tradition also has their list of relationships. And all of them, of course, deal with looking upon God as mother. But anyhow, here he's talking about the attitude of a hero. And I don't remember so many things, but there's this one Vira Bhava and the other Pashu Bhava, and maybe Daiva Bhava, I don't remember. But the 3 different ways that the worshippers of the Divine Mother, different attitudes that they take. Maharaj, yeah. The Shaktas have 3 different relationships. One is this Pashu Bhava, one is Vira Bhava, and Divya Bhava. Yeah. So Sri Ramakrishna is, for some reason, usually he'll refer to the others, look upon God as the child or as the friend or the beloved and everything. But here, for some reason, he's mentioning this attitude of a hero. And then a friend, so this is the Satya Bhava that we associate with the 5 of Vaishnava, or a handmaid or a child. So he's not being at all technical here, sticking to any one tradition, because there are many other possible attitudes. Very often, Sri Ramakrishna will emphasize the attitude of servant to the master, the Dasya Bhava that Hanuman cherished toward Sri Rama. So, but the point is that when we emphasize this idea of a relationship, then we adjust our understanding of the 2 halves of the equation. The one is the worshiper and the other is the object of worship. So it's not simply that we look upon God in a certain way, but we look upon ourselves in a certain way. And they have to correspond. So if we have a very heroic attitude and we look upon God as a mother, then it won't be the same as if we have the attitude of a child and look upon God as mother. So there are different ways of worshiping God as mother, different attitudes that one can take. This Divya Bhava is the one that Thakur recommends. That Vira Bhava, Pashu Bhava, some of these are connected with tantric type of practices. But in any event, the emphasis is more on adjusting our understanding of who we are than upon what the nature of God is. So the emphasis will be more, so will Dasya Bhava, emphasis will be more on identification with one of the paradigms. We've seen this. This is what Sri Ramakrishna did during his period of sadhana, that if he wanted to worship Rama, first he had to become Hanuman. This was his primary, in order to practice this dasya bhava, that all of his mind had to be on Hanuman, and he had to have some experience of Hanuman. This is the way generally we find in order to worship God as a handmaid. He had to completely change his sense of identification from identifying with a male body to a female body, or a female mindset, we can say, and then to do that type of practice. We don't hear it so much with this Vatsalya Bhava when he worshipped God as Ram Lala. But generally, that attitude also means that we look upon ourselves as a mother figure. So the point is that we're doing two things. One, we're adopting a particular attitude with regard to ourselves. And because of that, we're loosening and actually kind of replacing our normal sense of identification with this physical body and mind and everything. So it serves two purposes, that we're re-identifying identifying ourselves in a divine relationship, which means automatically that if I think of myself as a child of the Divine Mother, then I have to be thinking of myself as spirit. It's a spiritual relationship. If I think of myself as a child of my biological mother, then I'm identified with this physical body that comes from biologically from the mother. So it's very subtly breaking this sense of identification that we have with this normal feeling that I am this body, mind, sense of personality, and everything. It's breaking all of that. And it allows for intimacy, this type of relationship. It gives some sweetness to our spiritual life. So this was really one of the main teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, of course, especially for the path of devotion. So Bhava Asray Korte Hoy, he used this expression, a very strong expression, that we really ground our spiritual practice, spiritual life in this relationship. It becomes our haven, our safe haven somehow. And Arop Korte Hoy, this other term he uses, that means we switch our identification. We superimpose a new personality on ourselves, which we identify with. So these two things, that this relationship and this changing of our sense of self-identification, which will enable us to feel ourselves to be spirit and not just a body-mind complex. So this, as I say, the Thakur recommended this very strongly. And it doesn't have to be always the same. No, we talk about consistency in spiritual life, not having one mood one day, another the next day, keep switching and changing. But there's nothing wrong with the times feeling when we're active. We're very busy with things. We feel that we're a servant of God. And at other times, we feel that we're taking shelter with God, like the small child, and God is the mother. I don't think there's any inconsistency with having a variety of moods and relationships, as long as there's some binding power, something holding it all together. We're not abandoning one and taking up a new practice or anything. Sometimes Sri Ramakrishna would ask devotees, he asks M, what do you like? And he'll say, sometimes I like this, the attitude of the jnani, sometimes the servant of God. So we can be jnanis when we sit for meditation. The world doesn't exist. We sit for meditation. Brahman alone is real. And when we're working and busy, we can feel we're a servant of God. When we're sitting in the shrine weeping for God, we can feel we're a child of God. No, I don't see any contradiction in any of these attitudes. They're all very beautiful, very helpful attitudes. Some are more appropriate and fitting, and we feel more comfortable with certain attitudes as opposed to certain other attitudes. There's some for whom this attitude, the lover and the beloved, it doesn't work at all. a very foreign type of thing. And for others, this is the best for them. So everyone is a little bit different. I think this Swamiji emphasized a lot this idea, at least for the monks of the order, to feel that we're servants. Somehow we're soldiers even, soldiers in the army of Sri Ramakrishna. Swamiji is our leader. The Senapati, and that I would take that type of attitude. But at the same, so Sri Ramakrishna, he practiced all of them. That we know. He practiced all the different spiritual attitudes and different paths. So let me read that again. In order to realize God, a devotee should make use of a particular attitude. Actually, hold on to ground the spiritual practice in that. The attitude of a hero, or a friend, or a handmaid, or a child. So this is not an exhaustive list. It's not the list he usually gives. It's not the typical 5 Vaishnava attitudes, but these are all different attitudes that we find in the Shakta tradition as well. Mani Malik was also there. He said, only then can one feel attached to God. Master, for many days I cherished the feeling that I was a companion of the Divine Mother. I used to say, I am the handmaid of Brahmamai, the blissful mother. O companions of the Divine Mother, make me the mother's handmaid. I shall go about proudly saying, I am Brahmamai's handmaid. And this was mostly when he stayed with Mathura in their Kolkata residence, and lived like a woman, really, with them, slept in the same room sometimes, and in their big bedroom. And he said through this practice, he was able to completely remove this normal sense of identification with the male body. Because the self has no gender, neither male nor female. It's all identification with this physical body and with qualities that we've been told from childhood are either masculine or feminine. A lot of it is cultural. If we're too soft-natured, then it's feminine. If we're too hard and uncaring, then masculine. We have these are very much cultural things, because we'll find that these qualities can be developed in anyone. This is why Sri Ramakrishna, he used to say that some of what so-called feminine qualities were more manifest in some of his devotees, male, and so he would say with Bhavanath and Swamiji, both path of knowledge, but one feminine aspect and one masculine. So he had his own way of understanding, not based on any gender identification or anything, but on these qualities, what we call masculine and feminine qualities. So he practiced that for a long time. He seemed to do 2 things. I don't know at the same time or at different times or how we did it, but one, this companion of Radha, and to worship this Madhura Bhava, and the other, this handmaid of the Divine Mother. Now I don't know if they were 2 different times or 2 different things, or do you know? Anyhow, here he's emphasizing this. I used to say, I'm the handmaid of Brahmamai, the blissful mother. O companions of the Divine Mother, make me the mother's handmaid. I shall go about proudly saying, I am Brahmamai's handmaid. Some souls realize God without practicing any spiritual discipline. They are called Nityasiddhas, eternally perfect. Now, this is another doctrine, we can say, or conviction that Sri Ramakrishna had, and something we find in the scriptures also, that there are some who are not born because of some unfulfilled karma, that they hadn't attained perfection, and therefore, because of their past karma, they were born again. Either these Nityasiddhas, either they're companions of the avatar and come along with the avatar, or they have some desire to work for the welfare of the world, some deep feeling of compassion, the bodhisattva idea that we have in Buddhist tradition, and they're born again for that reason. The Ishvara Koti is a Nityasiddha, but I don't think every Nityasiddha is an Ishvara Koti. These are all categories that we like categories so much to fit everything into a particular category. We don't know exactly these things, but if we look at the Buddhist tradition, there's no concept of avatar, but they have this belief that there are some who attain perfection, nirvana, but actively withhold the final liberation, the parinirvana, and take a vow to be born again as long as others are still in ignorance, to help them out of their suffering. So when Swamiji says, "May I be born again and again, worship the only God I believe in, the sum total of all," that does it have to be each time the avatar comes? These are mysterious things. We don't know the answers to these things. There was an incident when Swami Shivananda, I believe, he was asked about these Ishvara Kotis. And he said, "What do I know? I wasn't one of them." And then he said, "But by Thakur's grace, I've become one." Now, that means that when Thakur comes again, he'll come again with them. We don't know how these things work exactly, but with this Nityasiddha, there'll be many cases. Thakur will talk about Prahlada, Dhruva, and others, Narada, and everything, that aren't necessarily companions of an avatar. They may be, may not be, but anyhow, he uses two different terms. I personally feel that all of the direct disciples were Nityasiddhas. And very often he'll say, "Look at these boys, they're all Nityasiddhas." But he only mentioned 6 for the Ishvara Koti. So there's some distinction in Thakur's mind when he talks about that. So anyhow, he's now talking about these different ways that people can attain perfection. For those who are born perfect, a little bit of veil of Maya is there, a little dust just to be shaken off, and nothing too much, even though we see they did tremendous austerities, the direct disciples and everything. But anyhow, here he says, they realize God without practicing any spiritual discipline. Now, the other thing he says about them is sometimes they have their realization first, then they do spiritual practice afterwards, which we see. In the case of the direct disciples, they realized God without any spiritual discipline, but it was through the touch of Sri Ramakrishna also. So which was it? Was it their own perfection, or was it, of course, he wouldn't do that with everybody. It was they had to be ready for it. Anyhow, so this is Nityasiddha. Those who have realized God through austerity and japa and the like are called sadhana siddha, perfect through spiritual discipline. Again, there are those who are called kripa siddha, perfect through divine grace. These last may be compared to a room kept dark in 1,000 years, which become light the moment a lamp is brought in. Now, these are not so terribly different. That it's all a question of degree, how much spiritual practice, how much time it takes, how quickly it seems to happen. If we want, we can say that everyone is kripa siddha, that we don't get perfection without grace somehow. But even in different traditions, in the Japanese tradition, they emphasize this idea of suddenness, that it's a like flash experience. It happens all at once. Not through any deep, long spiritual practice. Gradually, we sit longer in meditation, little visions, higher and higher. No, just like that. Yeah, the satori, they call it. So the different traditions are also different. And he'll talk about that. Then there's a class of devotees, the Vartat Siddha. The same thing. That is to say, those who have suddenly attained God vision. So this will depend on the personality of the person and all sorts of different things. There are cases like that of a poor boy who has suddenly found favor with a rich man. The rich man marries his daughter to the boy, and along with her gives him land, house, carriage, servants, and so forth. Sometimes he talks about somebody's digging for well, but instead of having to dig the water, they happen to break into the pipe or something, or an underground spring, and the water goes up quickly like that. There's still another class of devotees, the Swapna-siddha, who have had the vision of God in a dream. Now, we don't hear too many cases of this, but Sri Ramakrishna, he gave great importance to spiritual dreams. We have many instances where someone will tell him a dream, and he'll say, how wonderful, my hair standing on end, and that M had that one dream, and when he says, quickly take initiation, and so he gave it importance to the spiritual dream. It leaves a different type of impression that I don't know why or how exactly, but it can have a very long-lasting impression. That we really feel that there's some depth of reality to it that we don't feel in an ordinary dream. I don't know why, I can't explain it or anything, but I fully believe that I don't know about the God realization in a dream, but I know that there are certain types of dreams that we wake up and we think, wow, yeah, did that really happen? And it really, when we talk about memory, we wake up from a dream, we say, it was just a dream. But if we look back on memory, sometimes I, myself personally, my earliest memory that I have is a dream. When I was very young, a nightmare. It wasn't a pleasant dream or anything. But I remember it when we lived in this old house. I don't remember anything else from that house. It left such a deep impression. It wasn't a good one, but still. So the mind is funny. These are the dreams, but special types of dreams can in our memory can be almost like the reality. We remember it as if it actually happened, and we may feel that it actually happened. And many traditions, of course, they really believe that subtle body leaves the physical body, goes there, has that actual experience, then comes back in. They'll give a great importance to dream. We're modern psychological people. We don't give it so much importance, but anyhow, this for Sri Ramakrishna, this spiritual dream was something to really give special importance to understand the significance of it. Surendra, smiling. Let us go to sleep then. We shall wake and find ourselves babus, aristocrats. Master, tenderly. You are already a babu. This Surendra, he was a very sensitive person. Yeah, he could get his feelings hurt a little bit. He liked to be appreciated a little bit. He was very generous, but he thought of himself as not very generous, but very generous. And Sri Ramakrishna sometimes would really go out of his way to show him kindness, and because he appreciated him also. He was a great soul, Surendra. Master, tenderly. You are already a babu. When the letter A is joined to the letter Ka, Ka becomes Ka. It is futile to add another A. If you add it, you will still have the same Ka, all left. Now, for those who don't know how the language, the alphabet works, this is the Devanagari Bengali the alphabet. This won't make too much sense, but what he's saying is you're already perfect. How much can we add on to you? You're already fulfilled. Anyhow, this is a nice compliment to him. The Nityasiddha is in a class apart. He is like Arani wood. There's a footnote: a piece of wood used for kindling the sacred fire by friction. Yeah, this goes back to the Vedic period. When they make the fire, they have to have one on top and one on the bottom, in the middle, and they rub them together. And there's great symbolic significance to it. It's a part of the whole yajna tradition. A little rubbing produces fire. Yeah, they didn't have matches or anything in those days. They would rub the sticks together. You can get fire from it even without rubbing. This is the Nityasiddha. The Nityasiddha realizes God by practicing slight spiritual discipline and sometimes without practicing any at all. Sometimes Sri Ramakrishna says how much they did in the previous lifetime, but they're already perfect. They've already attained the highest type of wisdom and realization in the previous lifetime. So there's not much for them. A little dust, a little veil of Maya that has to be shaken off. But he does practice spiritual discipline after realizing God. This is exactly what we see with the direct disciples. He's like the gourd or pumpkin vine, first fruit, then flower. The Pundit smiled at this illustration. Master, there's the instance of Prahlada. So Thakur considers him Nityasiddha. He was a Nityasiddha. While writing the letter Ka, he shed a stream of tears. Ka because of the first letter in the name of Krishna. The master was pleased with the Pandit's humility. He praised him to the devotees. He's a long conversation. It's going on for several pages. And how he remembered everything. It was a very long conversation. Master, he has such a nice nature. You find no difficulty in driving a nail into a mud wall, but its point breaks if you try to drive it against a stone, and still it will not pierce it. There are people whose spiritual consciousness is not at all awakened, even though they hear about God 1,000 times. They are like a crocodile on whose hide you cannot make any impression with the sword. Pandit. But one can hurt a crocodile by throwing a spear into its belly. All laugh. Master smiling. What good is there in reading a whole lot of scriptures? Now, this is, he's talking to a Pandit. That's all they do, day and night studying scripture and everything. So, this is one of those examples of Sri Ramakrishna, sometimes reinforcing and encouraging, other times correcting. And so with his Pandit, he just flattered him. He's saying what a nice person he is. And now he's telling him, yeah, but don't get too much. Don't think of yourself too much as a big scholar and everything. What good is there in reading a whole lot of scriptures? What good is there in the study of philosophy? What is the use of talking big? In order to learn archery, one should first aim at a banana tree, then at a reed, then at a wick, and last at a flying bird. At the beginning, one should concentrate on God with form. Now he goes from one thing to another here. He's starting out with this idea of study of philosophy. Now, what do we gain through the study of philosophy? We get some understanding. We get some conviction. We don't want to accept anything without it making sense. It has to appeal to logic. Doubts will be cleared. Yeah. And we don't, once these doubts are cleared, we don't have to keep going back over and over again. Once we say, yes, this makes sense to me, then we do our spiritual practice. Now, after that, if we like to study philosophical books and things like that, and that also can reinforce, it serves some purpose, but just to do it for the sake of increasing our knowledge so that we memorize more verses, that we can give big lectures and all of that, there's nothing to that. It only increases his ego and everything. There's nothing gained by any of that. We do it. We have to do it a little bit, this study, because we have nothing else to do. I've told that story before, that I had a philosophy professor that was asked by one of the students that why is it that most of the philosophers were monks, Shankaracharya and everything. Oh, no. How did he put it? Why? Anyhow, he said, oh, they had a lot of time on their hands. They had nothing else to do. They were monks. That's why most of them were philosophers. Yeah, something like that. Anyhow, there's a value to it, but a limited value. And we can forget the real purpose of study of the scripture. We can develop it. It becomes a type of enjoyment. So we have to be a little bit cautious and analyze the mind and really see when we read things and study things that it should deepen our conviction and it should encourage us to do more spiritual practice. And if we're really we want to find out, are we gaining anything from all the study of philosophy? We have to ask: have we increased our viveka and vairagya? Have we increased our renunciation, dispassion, a sense of discrimination? Have we gained in kindness and compassion and love and everything? This will be the test. Otherwise, if it just brain gets bigger and bigger and the ego gets bigger and bigger, there's no point in any of it. Anyhow, he starts out with that, and now he's switching to this idea of starting out worshiping God with form, preliminary types of things. Sometimes we hear that, say, there's an image worship. There's a kindergarten. There's a very beginning stage. But Thakur did it and realized God through it. It's not such a beginning stage. But we have the kind of a hierarchy. Higher than that will be japa. Higher than that will be meditation. It would get subtler and subtler and subtler. But Thakur's idea was that's also true, but the other side is also true, that through any of these that one can have that highest type of realization. But we start to feel things get more and more subtle. That's all. And if we start out worshiping God as far away, then we start thinking of God as dwelling within the heart. There is some type of progression, we can say. Thakur gives different illustrations also that it becomes more and more intimate. First, 10 arms Durga, and then 6 arms, and then 4 arms, and then worshiping God as a child, a baby, a Gopala. Different, but we can go straight with one of them. It's not always that we keep changing and that it becomes more and more subtle and everything. Then there are devotees who are beyond the 3 gunas. They are eternally devoted to God, like Narada. These devotees behold Krishna as Chinmaya, all spirit. His abode is Chinmaya. His devotees as Chinmaya. To them, God is eternal. His abode is eternal. His devotee is eternal. This beyond the 3 gunas, this is also a sign of the jnani. The jnani is the one who's not attached to anything. That even this sattva, even this idea of being a good person, a kind person, and everything, that's also false identification. Beyond all of that, not a lot of ups and downs. The Gita is interesting because all the descriptions of the jnani and the descriptions of the devotee, the bhakta, are the same. And it all goes back to that kind of very even-keeled type of attitude, seeing sameness everywhere, not rejoicing too much, and there's the same in pleasure and pain, success and failure. That's emphasized very much in Gita. Now he'll make a very interesting statement, which he makes in other places. Those who reason and speculate following the process of neti do not accept the incarnation of God. Some other times he'll say the jnani doesn't accept the incarnation of God. And here we'll get to this. Hazara says, well, that divine incarnation is only for the bhakta and not for the jnani, because the jnani is quite contented with his ideal, I am he. Now, how to understand this? Because we know that there are many we can say in our order, there are many in Ramakrishna order who really have the attitude of a jnani, and at the same time fully accepts Ramakrishna as an avatar. Now, so why is Ramakrishna giving the indication that these two don't go together? I have a few guesses. One, when Sri Ramakrishna talks about the jnani, very often he's talking about the period of the Upanishads, when there is no concept of the avatar at that time. Avatar comes with it later with Gita and then Puranas and everything. This is one thing. Then Sri Ramakrishna came into contact with what he called the modern day Brahmagyanis. That was the Brahma Samajis. Even though he used to say that they were really devotees, they were really bhaktas, not jnanis and everything, still he would call them his modern day the Brahmagyanis, and they didn't believe in this avatar. Yeah. And when Swamiji first came, Narendra, to Sri Ramakrishna, how he would argue against it. He said, God dwells equally within all beings. How do you differentiate one from the other? And God is infinite. And how are their parts? And all different arguments and everything, which were common, I think. We don't find him arguing the way Narendra did, but it took a long time before he accepted many of these ideas. Even the idea of samskaras and reincarnation and everything. So Sri Ramakrishna came into contact with these kind of intellectual types who didn't care much for this idea of the avatar. The one other possibility that it could be. But the way Sri Ramakrishna explains the avatar is something that is perfectly suitable for those following the path of knowledge. He gives such a beautiful type of explanation. It's not the type of explanation, that Narayana is in heaven and looking down, and there's a lot of problems. He said, now let me go down. He'll give beautiful illustrations, like the hole in the wall through which you can see the vast, infinite field, and there's so many different things. And just like the huge wave, we're all little waves, and the one is the huge wave. These are things that fit in perfectly with the understanding of Vijnani, that we're all different size containers, different degrees of spiritual power. And this earlier idea of those who such tremendous spiritual power that they can choose to be born again when the need arises. So we find, especially in the introduction to the Great Master, is a beautiful interpretation of the avatar, very logical, traced back to some Sankhya ideas and other ideas that anyone can accept. But his experience was that, and that especially with there's a big arguments with Narendra and everything, that for the Jnani didn't care so much for this idea of the avatar. There were different traditions. All of these Baal traditions and everything, they didn't care so much for the gods and goddesses. They liked the guru, the worship of the guru, Kartavaja and everything. Then there'll be others, this Dayananda Saraswati. He liked all these gods and goddesses from the Vedic period, not so much the modern ones. Everyone, they all had different ideas and different theories at that time. But the idea of these avatar really has to be accepted by any traditional Vedantin, because they have to accept Gita as one of the Prasthanatraya. So for Shankaracharya, he can't say there's no avatar. He may give his own type of explanation and everything, but that'll be accepted generally. Maybe not emphasized. This is the idea. But for Sri Ramakrishna, he saw that those who like this Soham attitude, they didn't, because the avatar means this bhakti relationship and worship, that type of idea. So he says, Hazara says, well, that divine incarnation is only for the bhakta and not for the jnani, because the jnani is quite contented with his ideal of I am he. So it may be that the jnani will accept the idea of the avatar, but it's not so important. It may accept the idea of Divine Mother, but not so important. They only want to know who am I, that type of idea. Sri Ramakrishna and the devotees remained silent a while. The Pundit resumed the conversation. Pundit: Sir, how does one get rid of callousness? Laughter makes me think of muscles and nerves. It's an interesting question. Grief makes me think of the nervous system. Master, smiling: That is why Narayan Shastri used to say, the harmful effect of the study of the scriptures is that it encourages reasoning and arguing. And Sri Ramakrishna, it's not the typical type of question that he'll give a very definite answer to. But I think this is true with the scientists also, that they'll always think in terms, or even medical people, in terms of physical makeup of the body and everything like that. Pundit: Is there no way for us then? Master: Yes, there's the path of discrimination. In a song occurs the line, ask your son discrimination about the truth. Now, this is where we have that distinction between viveka and vichara. That just arguing does no good, but trying to discriminate between what's real and what's unreal, what's permanent, what's changing, what's of ultimate value, and what's of just passing enjoyment. That type of discrimination should be done always. Sri Ramakrishna says always. We always have to guard and analyze the mind. And when we decide what is of real value, we have to follow it. We have to follow it. Otherwise, there's no point. Just to say, yeah, I know that this is the right thing to do, but I'll start tomorrow. It doesn't make any sense. The way lies through discrimination, renunciation, and passionate yearning for God. Viveka, Vairagya, and Anurag. You should add Anurag, this passionate love for God. Now, what is the relationship between this Vairagya and Anuraga? For Sri Ramakrishna, they're very intimately related. That he says we can't have this passion for the world without some longing for something higher. So I was thinking, we have this illustration of the guru pressing the devotee's head underwater. And what does the devotee say afterwards? There's two things. One, I felt as if I were drowning, gasping for breath, and that longing to get a breath of fresh air. So the one is Vairagya, that we feel that we're burning up in this world, that we're drowning, we're dying, that we want to escape. And the other is longing for that realization, for something higher. So they're very closely related, this Anuraga and Vairagya. We have to develop both of them together at the same time. The longing for something higher, which means that this lower thing, it begins to chafe. It begins to almost become unbearable. That we want to cast it off. That it's just something that in the beginning it seems like it's nice and enjoyable. Then it reaches a point where we just want to be free from it. That's Vairagya. But there has to be something that replaces it, something we're longing for. So actually, Sri Ramakrishna emphasizes Anuraga more. Don't worry too much about giving up something lower. Reach for something higher. Automatically, the lower will fall off. So these are the three things that he's mentioning here. This Viveka, Vairagya, and Anuraga. Unless a man practices discrimination, he cannot utter the right words. He's going to talk about our Pundit Samadhyaya again. Yeah, that means not just utter the right words, it means to have a proper understanding of things. What's of value and what's of not important. One time, after expounding religion at great length, Pundit Samadhyayi said, God is dry. He reminded me of the man who once said, my uncle's cowshed is full of horses. Now, does anyone keep horses in a cowshed? With a smile. Now, if he's talking to this Pundit, you have become like a chanabara. This is the gulab jamun. This first, that you have to fry it in oil, turn it brown, and then you soak it in the syrup. Yeah. So fry it in butter. Yeah. So sometimes it's fried in butter, fried in the oil of knowledge, and soaked in the syrup of bhakti. Chanabara. He gives that example. Now it will be good for you and for others as well if you were soaked in syrup. Okay, so he's saying that this chanabara is half done. You've already fried yourself in the oil of knowledge. Now for a few days, let it soak up that syrup of love and devotion. So the beautiful. You've become like a chanabara, fry it in butter. Now it would be good for you and for others as well if you were soaked in syrup a few days, just a few days. Pundit smiling. The sweetmeat is over fried. It has become charred. Yeah, that happens sometimes. Master with a laugh. No. It is brown as a cockroach. That's just the color that you just the right color. Hazara. The sweetmeat is well cooked. It has become spongy. Now it will soak up the syrup nicely. The Hazara is always defending this Pundit. He liked him very much. Plus, they're both jnanis. Yeah. Master. You see, there's no need to read too much of the scriptures. Again, to the Pundit. If you read too much, you will be inclined to reason and argue. Nangta used to teach me thus. What you get by repeating the word Gita 10 times is the essence of the book. In other words, if you repeat Gita 10 times, it is reversed into Tagi, which indicates renunciation. Now, Sri Ramakrishna, he obviously sees something in this Pundit. And there were other Pundits that he spoke the same way to them, and they actually renounced and went off and never heard again. They heard they went to Benares, this or that. They renounced everything at the end. So he sees something in him, and he's not talking ordinary Pundit. He doesn't care. Of course, they'll study all the time, but if their goal is realization, then at some point they have to do intense spiritual practice. That's all. Yes, the way to realize God is through discrimination, renunciation, and yearning for Him. What kind of yearning? One should yearn for God as the cow with yearning heart runs after its calf. Pundit. The same thing is said in the Vedas. O God, we call on thee as the cow loads for the calf. Master. Add your tears to your yearning. Now, to the Pundit, this is somebody who he teaches this path of knowledge. That it's remarkable that he sees this. Obviously, that the Pundit has some devotion within. And God knows how his life, how much his life was changed after meeting Thakur. I don't know that much about what happened later, but what a blessing for him. Add your tears to your yearning. And if you can renounce everything through discrimination and dispassion, then you will be able to see God. That yearning brings about God intoxication, whether you follow the path of knowledge or the path of devotion. The jnani also needs this vyakulata. This was the case with Buddha, especially, that it became unbearable for him to lead this ordinary life. Swamiji has a beautiful quote, calling things by wrong names and telling, a beautiful quote about that. It became unbearable for him that last night, because of the birth of the child, they had singing and dancing and revelry and food and drink, and he saw that people stuffing themselves and half drunk and passed out and everything. He said it was like a living hell. he couldn't bear it for another second, and had to take off, and he renounced that night. So that's also this vairagya and vyakulata, longing for freedom, longing for something ineffable that we don't know exactly what it is, but so we know that there's something that can be realized to make this life worthwhile. So for the jnani also needs this vyakulata, the yearning. The sage Durvasa was mad with the knowledge of God. There's a great deal of difference between the knowledge of a householder and that of an all-renouncing sannyasi. Now, Sri Ramakrishna doesn't always talk in these terms. This is one of the few times when he talks about this. Very often he'll say that it's the same knowledge, only it may manifest a little differently in the householder. Sometimes he says the same, only the householder has a little to fear, like living in a room with this kadzal, the little soot may get on the body, something like that. But now here, for some reason, he's making a big distinction. There's a great deal of difference between the knowledge of a householder and that of an all-renouncing sannyasi. The householder's knowledge is like the light of a lamp, which illumines only the inside of a room. He cannot see anything with the help of such knowledge except his own body and his immediate family. Now, I don't think he's talking about this ultimate realization, the ultimate knowledge, that type of jnana. That jnana comes for the householder. Householder really has to be perfectly free from any attachment, same as the sannyasi at that point. So he cannot see anything with the help of such knowledge except his own body and his immediate family. But the knowledge of the all-renouncing monk is like the light of the sun. Through that light, he can see both inside and outside the room. Chaitanya Deva's knowledge had the brilliance of the sun of knowledge. Further, he radiated the soothing light of the moon of devotion. He was endowed with both the knowledge of Brahman and ecstatic love of God. There was another conversation where somebody says that, that they won both. And he said, what are you talking about? It's a very rare thing. This Chaitanya Deva had it, to realize God fully, both with the devotion and with knowledge. To the Pundit, one can attain spiritual consciousness through both affirmation and negation. Now, this is another way of saying through bhakti and jnana. Affirmation is, yes, everything is God's play, everything is this lila, everything is manifestation. I try to see the divine in everything. And the other is, this is all changing, this is all temporary, this is all a vastu, there's no reality to it, Brahman alone is real. Two different paths. There's neti, and iti, they use the term, it's not such a technical term, but the neti, of course, is very well known, the path of knowledge. So both negation and affirmation are ways to realize one and the same goal. Infinite are the opinions and infinite are the ways. But you must remember one thing. The injunction is that the path of devotion described by Narada is best suited to the Kali Yuga. Now again, he's talking to this Pandit who is following this path of knowledge. Basically, he's teaching either the path of knowledge or he's teaching some type of orthodox injunctions and how to follow some of the teaching of the scriptures and things like that. But he's trying to soften him a little bit, to awaken something with him a little bit. But really, in Thakur's life, he emphasized this so much, and at the same time, he taught the highest wisdom. So it wasn't that this is any type of path of devotion that has some antagonism to these higher truths of Vedanta. It was really this jnana misra bhakti. It was really this devotional attitude grounded in this idea of oneness. So, path of devotion described by Narada, best suited for the Kali Yuga. According to this path, first comes bhakti, then bhava, when bhakti is matured. These are all ideas developed by this Chaitanya school mostly, Rupa and Sanatan. Higher than bhava or mahabhava and prema. An ordinary mortal does not attain mahabhava and prema. He who has achieved these has realized the goal. That is to say, has attained God. Now, this doesn't mean that an ordinary mortal won't realize God through this path of devotion. What it means is that there'll be a certain type of bhava that can take us to that oneness, which will be nothing like the devotional experiences that Chaitanya Deva had, that Radha had, that Sri Ramakrishna had, with all the physical things that accompany it and everything. It'll be of a different intensity, but through this path of devotion, he says over and over again that anyone can realize God through that. But realizing God and having that type of devotion, which means that constantly tears are flowing, that body may be burning, all these different things, that's not for an ordinary person.
But what does bhav have to do with the body, Maharaj?
These are bodily changes that take place when the mind reaches certain states or with the heart of the mind reach certain states of devotional manifestation.
Happen? Or they are just might happen kind of thing?
They'll happen when it reaches a certain intensity.
Oh.
Yeah, hair will stand on end. Huh? The shivering, the whole body will shake. Yeah, these things will happen, not with everybody. Some can have this realization without any of this. Say we have the example of Baburam, that everyone else was having all this ecstatic bhavas and going to moods, this and that. And he just said to Sri Ramakrishna, what's wrong with me? Why don't I experience it? And then the Thakur said, I'll talk to mother. And then he came back. The mother said, you'll have knowledge. You won't have this type of outward expression of things. Of course, he followed the path of devotion. But people are different that way. But for some, yeah, that these things will happen. That whole body will shake. That tears will uncontrollably will be flowing. These are physical changes that take place according to, just as the Kundalini rises, the mind goes to a different level. The same thing with the path of devotion, that it's almost an equivalent to the raising of Kundalini, the raising of this bhava into mahabhava and prema and everything. That there are tremendous physical changes. Look what happened to Swamiji when he went to Amarnath. They say the heart expanded even. And he had the blood vessel broke in one of his eyes. All these things through the intensity
That
of.
could be because of altitude also, and also,
Could be, but it could be that he had some tendency for that and everything, but it was the intensity of that emotion that triggered it. Yeah, there's no question. He had all of these things. This is the tradition, at least. This is the tradition, at least, that Radha had them and Chaitanya Deva had them. But this Urup and Sanatan, that was mostly what they did. That this one, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, is one big text. I didn't read it, but I know about it. That in the Great Master, there's a reference to it. There are 19 different bhavas and some different rasas, all different things. That they categorized all of these things. So they claim that these were all seen in the body of Radha, and Chaitanya Deva had all of them. And when the Brahmani came, she said, I see all of these signs in you, Sri Ramakrishna, that are written about in the scriptures with regard to Chaitanya Deva and Radha. That's why she was convinced that he was also an avatar. She knew those scriptures. She was an adept, and she was interesting. She was a master of the Tantras and also the Vaishnava scriptures, both. Okay, let's finish this page. Pundit. In expounding religion, one has to use a great many words, Master. While preaching, eliminate the head and tail. That is to say, emphasize only the essentials. And this is also not just preaching. When we read things, the Thakur says, even scripture is a mixture of sugar and sand. Some things we don't have to reject. We don't have to say, "Oh, that's nonsense. I don't like it." We have to learn to take the pearls, take the sugar, the things that are helpful for us. Okay, we can stop here. So we're at the bottom of page 485 with this Pundit in expounding religion. Om Niranjanam Nityamanantarupam Bhaktanukam Vikraham Ishavataram Parameshamidhyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namah. We bow our heads before Sri Ramakrishna, who was stainless, of infinite nature, whose heart melts in sympathy for his devotees, who is an embodiment of the divine and the Supreme Lord, and ever worthy of our worship. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace. Okay, thank you, everyone. We will meet again next Friday.
This Shashadhar Pandit, he was from Bangladesh, right?
I think so. Yeah, where did we see? Huh?